Well, thanks very much for having me this evening. My name is Dave Keenan. I'm the current president of the Minnesota Futurists, a chapter of the World Future Society. Our local chapter is one of the oldest chapters, and it is the oldest continuously operating chapter. That is, our founder kept his unit going where others took a break. Our founder passed away just a few years ago, and I'm the second in the follow-on leaders of our small group. The purpose of the Futurists is to advance serious and responsible investigation of future scenarios. That is, to think about what might happen with a serious toolbox without advocating a particular ideology. So all of our members come to learn and go off and do good works of their own conscience on their own time. The organization as a whole does not take any positions on anything. We are a nonprofit. We meet every Saturday morning in the Knights of Columbus Hall in Bloomington, and you're welcome to come and join us. I've attached information about our website, and I'll have more on that at the end. The futurist method is very simple. We look at the probable futures. What is the road we're on, and what does it look like 10, 15, 20 years, next year? And then we look at alternatives. What are some options that might happen? And among those, we look for which are preferable futures. So if you sort of say that the road we're on, the rut we're in, is the only one we're going to have, you're really committed to stick in the rut. But if you keep an open mind and look for opportunities, you can sometimes see those trigger points where you can make a change and start to turn the boat a bit. So we're going to have a look at where will we all be living in 2020. More suburban, more urban. The city of Richfield is a center suburban, I guess, middle ring, first tier. And what will be the makeup of these communities? Well, it's likely to be a combination. The general trend across the country and around the world is move into the cities, but not necessarily into the core. Aging will drive where people live, and aging is by far the most serious or important demographic that drives the decisions that you're considering here. Possibly because of better health care, more likely because of better employment opportunities or more convenience, more infrastructure support. So first-ring suburbs with good health care access will be popular. 90% of the growth in population will be minorities between now and 2050. This is the decline of the European Americans, and many of my colleagues at the Futurists are of diverse opinions about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I, for one, say it's happening, and it's important to get used to it. Between now and 2020, 74% increase in the number of people over 50. The one remarkable development in the last 100 years has been the increasing lifespan. The benefit of health care is that people are living longer, are surviving illnesses or accidents that 100 years ago would have taken them out of the population. And the increase in age under 50 is very small. So what we're seeing is a big shift in the demand. This is more than the baby boom bubble, although that in America is the biggest thing. We tend to underestimate the impact of aging. It's going to impact the sources of income that support the city, that support the government. Fixed incomes are difficult to levy taxes against. And while many people are working well into retirement, they're not working at the same kinds of pay scales they may have had when they were younger. So that's going to be another factor. Housing in the future will concentrate new apartment construction on urban and first-ring suburbs if they had good public transit. Both rental and condo, low-rise and high-rise. Low-rise usually 2 to 3 stories, and I'll show you some examples of what that might look like. 2-story buildings will often provide separate entrance for each unit if the units are not primarily to be for seniors. That is a front door and back door. When you get into assisted living, there's a tendency to manage that a little differently. Low density, low cost, single family homes and deteriorated multifamily housing will be replaced by higher density. This is the compression function as people are trying to get more use out of limited ground space. Technology in the house of the future is going to be more integrated, but that's not the selling point. One of the discussion topics we have is about the Internet of Things, that your toaster will talk to your refrigerator, will talk to your washing machine, will talk to your phone, will talk to your home base, and keep track of things like the temperature and the amount of energy that's being used, the amount of food that's in the fridge, what's its sell-by date, what's the, and so forth and so on. If you think about some of the things you've seen at Disney World, they are visions out of the Jetsons, but that's not likely to be the case. That's not what we're going to see. Another thing that will be different in the next 10 to 15 years will be how houses are assembled and put together. It's less likely that stud and stick-built homes will be the norm. It's more likely that prefab or a variety of manufactured components will be delivered on site and assembled in a much shorter period of time. So a building site is not likely to be under construction for months and months at a time in the future. Design quality will be why people purchase these homes delivered as components, and that through virtual reality you'll be able to try on a design, that the realistic feel of walking through the rooms will be more accessible. Realtors are using virtual walkthroughs in their home sale process now. That's likely to only get better and better, so that even as you're contemplating an architect's plan, you can envision how the furniture is going to fit and what it'll actually feel like to be in the rooms. Micro apartments are a new or a renewed idea that's appearing on the East and West Coast for affordable housing as well as for areas which don't have a lot of floor space to build new homes into. And China is developing a low labor content, high-rise housing built of modules, constructed by automation and assembled on site. We've seen hotels that are assembled and each of the rooms is delivered as a unit, plugged into the plumbing in the central hall, and the mint is on the pillow as it's delivered from the truck. The McMansion, the starter castle, has run its course, truly as one of the real estate services that declares that the demand for larger and larger homes has turned the other way. People are now looking at downscaling or downsizing, in part because of the energy cost, in part because they found that it just doesn't make much sense. So this is an example of homes of the future. This is from a CNBC report, and there are links available. Well, that's not a very good picture, but this is perhaps a better example of one of the micro apartments. This is in the Boston Seaport, a high-density, young, urban, professional community. You can have a look and see that it's not very much living space. It does include some outdoor space. This is another one. This is from ADD Inc., 375 400 square foot apartment structures with everything possible built in and tucked away. So the sofa pulls out. There's a desk built into the kitchen countertop. Storage is at a premium. There's not a lot of extra furniture. Every piece is got more than one function kind of thing. And as I said, this is West Coast, San Francisco. 100 square foot, 150 square foot of living area, 300 cubic feet of storage, 9-foot ceilings, good light, but tiny. This is an artist's conception of one of the units built. You can see that these don't look unfamiliar as an exterior view from many buildings in the community. But as you go inside, you can see not unlike the travel trailer mobile home. You know, the table converts into a sleeping area, that everything has more than one function. And so it looks nice. It looks different than a fifth wheel motorhome, but it's also different than the 2,000 square foot home most of us are used to. Another factor is different building techniques and different construction materials. This is one example. There have now been several items in the news that we've covered about basically a large gantry that builds the house from the ground up using additive manufacturing. So much like you would print a document, you can do 3D printing, and you can do 3D printing on a sufficiently large scale that you can now consider building a whole home. The other I'm going to pop to here is this little video. Okay.
Hit the OK button. That should open up the bigger.
So this is a 30-floor skyscraper assembled in 15 days.
Because the guys move so fast.
So, when was the last time you saw a 30-story building go up in less than a year? When was the site construction started? I mean, in most places, site preparation is a couple of months before the first, real activity appears on the site. These are remarkably interesting trends, and they may be, a sign of things to come. Prefab homes built in large pieces and delivered on site is another thing, but that's old technology. What's new is including sensors and appliances and infrastructure into the components, so as they're assembled, they're more ready to go than ever before. Another development approach is net zero energy, a target for a very tight, very green home, so that as a person living in the home, you have the best deal possible in managing the cost. LED lighting, solar panels, water heater and water filtering, energy efficient appliances, electric car charging. Electric vehicles are talked about as a storage battery for your home. That is, when you get your car in the garage, it may allow you to run a portion of your home's energy needs overnight. And when you're sleeping, it has enough time to charge up and be ready to take you out the next day. The goal is a monthly utility bill of about zero. That's impressive. One of the European models is the passive house. The first one built in the US is in Waldsee, Minnesota. Uses 85% less energy than most Minnesota homes, built to current building codes. And so there's some specs about that. There is a good number of homes built throughout Europe, Germany especially, but through Scandinavia as well, that are built to the passive house standard, a fairly strict set of building criterias, with the goal of so many watts per, or kilowatt hours per meter squared for heating and energy consumption overall. And this is another one from Illinois. Their green initiatives for developers seeking federal low-income housing tax credits, low-flow faucets, shower heads and toilets, native vegetation, most of which are water absorbent, Energy Star appliances, high-efficiently lighting and mechanical, and must provide a manual to property owners so that all of the goodness and the capability of these fancy units can be realized. This is another development. This one is called the Med Cottage, developed, I believe, in North Carolina. This is an add-on unit. Drop it in your backyard to support an aged parent who is no longer able to care for themselves but not ready for a nursing home. Perhaps someone who has undergone a hip replacement and needs a bit of time to recover. Close monitoring, yet private quarters. Many cities have had issues with how do you allow for or manage the zoning requirements so that this is not at odds in those cases where it seems like the ideal thing. It includes things like a lift, video monitors, a virtual companion, well thought out miniaturized proximity to things like a fridge or a microwave, TV, and so forth. 288 square foot home, $2,000 a month lease, is less than the cost of assisted living facility. And Clark Hill Estate litigation blog is one of the places where people have been talking about, but our city doesn't allow this, or our community had an issue with this. This is a little bit wilder concept. I didn't include some of the wilder concepts like a houseboat, as there aren't many opportunities in Richfield for that. But the idea of using part of the exterior as a substrate for growing plants is a theme that comes up again and again. That the ability to provide some shielding, to provide some oxygenation and carbon dioxide capture and things like that. These are far more, they're a lot further out there, but there are some ideas in these that may be appearing in homes and construction projects in the nearer future. So in trying to manage time and wrap up quickly, the issue in your community is going to be, what are the demographics likely to be? Where are the fluxes of people coming and going? The aging issue is trickier, and some of the things I've presented to you maybe give you some ideas. Energy efficiency, infrastructure efficiency, anticipate distributed energy, that is opportunities where a homeowner or homeowners association may generate some of their energy from solar or wind or fuel cells or a fleet of their own vehicles in order to relieve some of the load on the grid. And then have consideration for new building techniques and what that may mean to the community in terms of appearance and quality and resale and livability and so forth. Here's my contact information. You can visit our website and I'd be happy to take any questions.
David, when you talk about probable future, you're making projections based upon trends that you've already seen? I mean, talk a little bit more about the scenarios that you describe. What's the source of the information for those projections? Yeah,
I've actually included sources on a lot of the slides, and there's a copy of this presentation for you to look at in greater detail. There is a lot more material that I can point to. We actually put this together last fall, gave our first run through. We present in an hour-and-a-half format at our group meetings. So there is some more content that I left out in order to sort of narrow in on what might be of interest to the City of Richfield. But in general, we look at those kinds of trends from federal, state. We've had the state demographer come and talk to us about what are the Twin Cities and statewide demographic trends. We look at employment trends. We look at technology trends. We look at, in the course of our looking at the future, technology, economics, society, management, education. We even have a special interest group that meets on peace futures. But we try, over the course of several cycles of presentations, to put together a picture of, here's what the mainline news media says is likely to happen over the next several years. And what are the things that are uncomfortable about that? Where are new technologies or new social, cultural norms colliding with those? And how are we going to resolve those? What are some better ways to go about it, perhaps? In our first Saturday of the month, we talk about future techniques. That is, we actually train in tools and methods for looking at the future and considering the strengths and weaknesses, the threats and opportunities, the mapping of those milestones in the technological landscape, and try to give you some better sense of, is this an anecdotal idea, or is this more likely what the groove looks like that we're stuck in?
Other questions?
I was wondering, with the prefab and the robot-built homes, what kinds of materials would generally be used in something like that? Are they much different?
The articles that I've been reading in the last year talk about mixtures of concrete and polymer. And so much like laying a foundation brick by brick, these are basically stepwise poured concrete-like materials. Mostly things that can be prepared and delivered in a fluid-like fashion, and then delivered and cured sufficiently, one row or layer or slice on top of the next, in order to make all kinds of intricate features and quickly move along the pattern.
Other questions or comments? Anything you saw that you don't buy?
You've talked a lot about your very high-density housing, and we spent a good portion of the first part of the presentation talking about that. The examples you gave are for incredibly dense populations. How long do you think it will be before Richfield will need to address that kind of population density?
I can't imagine that the need is going to be there. What I think is more likely that you're going to have some developers who see this as an opportunity based on young, single, or just out of school professionals who want to live in this community rather than in someplace else. And you're going to be faced with, well, that doesn't look like the houses that we have just down the block here. They look different. So what is it about them, and what should we be thinking about when those kinds of opportunities come at us? I'm not sure. I think high density downtown areas, that may be an opportunity, but many of the young executive or young professional jobs aren't in the downtown. They're out in the wider suburban areas. And so I think those are going to be some of the balancing points. If you have an employer that draws a lot of people and you're having a hard time finding homes for those people, this may be an opportunity for you to consider.
Another follow-up question. Richfield also has an extensive dearth of single-bedroom apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a trend at all towards rehabbing those apartments?
I haven't seen.
Or is this pretty much, it's just?
Well, I think there's a point at which, if it's an economic consideration, if you can afford to do the rehab and bring it up to desirability. I mean, part of this is that these micro apartments, for example, are far smaller than traditional apartments, at least the ones that I've lived in, and it doesn't look like it would fit in the kinds of space that traditional 12 to 20 unit apartment complex would have. But I'm not a builder, so I can't really say where the best point is going to be.
I was just curious.
Jeremy?
Yes.
David, when I think about a lot of trends and how trends kind of flow throughout the country and things like that, a lot of times it's from the coast driven in, or for other larger metropolitan areas, and then dispersing. Would you say, are there any areas that maybe say, are 5 years ahead of the Twin Cities, or, when you look at some of these types of housing trends? I guess one example I think of is just, looking at like how much more urban, or not urban, how much more, how many more people are living in like downtown Chicago And now you see that trend starting to happen here in the Twin Cities, you know, as there's more apartments being built downtown, things like that. Is there any, I don't know, I guess my question would be, is there, you know, a place that, another city that we could look at that we could kind of say, oh, you know, that, maybe that's like Minneapolis 5 years out, or, you know, the Twin Cities metro area. I mean, obviously there's a lot of other drivers, but.
Yeah, I don't have a particular, you know, you should really drive, you know, 160 miles and have a look at this place, because I'm not seeing that. What I think I'm seeing and what I think I'm hearing and reading about more is the idea that the communities that are the most vibrant are the ones that have a good mix of walking space and you know, community close by. So if you're walking to the, you know, the convenience store, grocery store, drugstore, rather than driving, that walking interaction and mixing with the people in the community tends to make for a more interesting, more vibrant, more energized community. And what I can see in places like Phoenix is that's gone too far. People drive out to their homes in a gated community and don't talk to anybody within the gated community and isolate themselves to such a degree. And there's a little bit of that in the Twin Cities, but by and large, neighborhoods tend to mix pretty well. Well, what are the elements that you can include in a neighborhood to make that easier, to make that better? Those are some thoughts that I think the pendulum may be swinging to. Desirability is going to be around smaller, walkable kinds of distances and less reliance on a car. My mother is currently in an assisted living facility, and one of the things we're looking at is the autonomous vehicle, where in order for her to go into town, she has to call a cab, but she doesn't like to ride in a cab. But a little vehicle that would pick her up and take her down to the library or take her around to a couple errands and bring her back, that's a neat idea. 10 years out, in her community, maybe 20 years out, but not impossible and not outside the range of capability anymore.
You know, I was in Vancouver 3 weeks ago, and Richfield is never going to achieve the densities of Vancouver, but the fact of the matter is when property values get to be as high as they are, and companies need to have workforce, there is a demand in Vancouver for these micro apartments. And they're micro apartments that are in buildings that have amenity, that are on transit lines, and a lot of public realm improvements around them. So I think we shouldn't get caught up so much on the specifics of the example as that there will be housing choice opportunities in the future, and that there may be some market for people that will be looking for smaller units and so forth. We need to figure that out as we get further down in this process. But I think your original observation about starting on the coast is correct, because that's where we have the higher densities.
And that's where you're going to see the trends, and as people move around, they're going to say, well, why don't we have one of those here? And somebody's going to say, I see an opportunity to put one of those here, and you're going to be faced with, do we like that or not? Are we ready for that? What are our preparedness for that kind of situation?
Or if there's a way to retrofit some of those older apartments in a way that makes them more energy efficient, it may not be as small as this example, but it may be an opportunity to retrofit that space in a way that simulates what's being talked about.
I'm sorry.
Well, in my involvement in the community for a while, I've been hearing a lot of these trends for a while. Things like, we have an expanding senior population, a shrinking younger population. And it always seems to me whenever I hear that kind of the notion that hangs in the air is what we need then is kind of a reactive approach in addressing these kind of macro demographic trends. But what I'm wondering is, as a community, is maybe another approach to take a more purposeful approach on having a community conversation on what kind of community do we want to be. Now, I'm not sitting here tonight suggesting what kind of community we should be. I think that has to be part of that conversation. But just as an example to illustrate it, let's say as part of that community conversation, we decide that we want to be the premier community for young families with children. Now, you may say that, well, young families with children is a smaller slice of that demographic pie. But what if we would decide that, well, but we want more than our share of that pie? So I'm just, wondering if, what is the right approach? Is it a reactive approach to the macro demographics? Or is it a more purposeful, thoughtful approach on defining what kind of community we'd like to be?
I think the fact that you're in this task force is a good start. You're thinking about things in what might happen, and having folks like me come and say, and here's some wild things that are out there that may be coming, knocking at your door in the future, so what do you think about those as well? Our effort is to try to expose you to some alternative futures, or some possible futures, and for you to decide what makes sense, and what are the issues that drive livability in your community. So I think the fact that you're getting together here is a very good start. I'm not seeing enough of this kind of community involvement.
The point I want to make is, David's not here telling the city of Richfield what Richfield should do. He's sharing ideas about the future, and that's what Billy Weber is going to be doing as well. And this group absolutely wants to take that information, a lot of other information, and be proactive about what kind of future you want to try and choose.
And I perfectly recognize that, and appreciate that. I just wanted to make this statement because I know sometimes whenever I hear kind of the demographics laid on the table, I always feel like there's kind of this feeling in the room that we're going to be reactive. And, kind of like maybe steer that thought in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had a question, sir?
Yeah, I was wondering about the prefab industry. Naturally, I think we all know that they're in to cut down costs and et cetera. When they're building all of these prefab pieces, how does the number compare to the old number? It seems to me that a couple of trucks came in the business 30, but that wasn't that many people working. Is that right?
Oh, I think that one guy was working really fast.
One.
No, I think the general idea. I mean, within China,
Yeah.
they are on a building boom. They're seeing the migration from rural settings to urban settings at such a pace that they're driven to create new cities where there weren't any before. And so these are examples of what, when you have a problem or an opportunity, just how far you can go. And I don't know that we're going to see any construction technique like this practiced in the US anytime soon, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to be the last time that kind of technique is put together. I know that there was a hotel built in the Twin Cities here where it was, the structure was put in and the rooms were delivered. And that kind of technique is neither new nor particularly novel. But the focus on bringing together the energy efficiency and the reusable materials or sustainable and the energy infrastructure is just becoming more and better done, so that there's going to be a point at which it does become the right or affordable or best choice way to go. I think that's still a few years out, but this is eye-opening trend.
It isn't just the construction cost, it's the full life cycle housing cost. And it's the substantially more energy efficient, substantially cleaner air, substantially less water use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the changes is just thinking about it from a different, sort of more holistic viewpoint too.
The demographics that you showed that in 2020, 74% increase in over 50-year-olds. Would we possibly be making too many senior buildings, too many assisted living buildings, that in 30 years they go, oh my gosh, we have all these things.
Well, I think the likelihood is there's over 50 is not in a wheelchair. Over 50 is actually still working until 75. But it's not comfortable with 6 flights of stairs. I mean, there's just some compromises that make sense in looking at an aging population group. The Minnesota State demographer showed us what their outlook is for the state of Minnesota and the Twin Cities, and there is population demographics information down to the neighborhood level. John, if you will get in touch with me, I will try to provide you a link, but that may be also useful in having a look, but, by street, by neighborhood, by, community area. What are the trends as far as birth rates and what age group folks are who live there?
Another thing to think about just is the adaptability of the housing that we're building today. And so the whole idea of putting all of our eggs into one basket and chasing the baby boomers as we have through much of the last several decades would be a bad strategy. But to create housing that can work for their needs, but also be more flexible and more adaptable for changing to be more useful housing for someone after that would be a smart strategy.
Oh, no, thank you, I was just gonna say, I happen to know that we're looking at a 1.9% replacement rate for population, and we're currently looking at the largest demographic in history retiring, being followed by the smallest demographic in history, and then behind that is the second largest.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, yes, we would want to have a huge amount of senior housing that was not adaptable, to John's point, that was not adaptable to a younger demographic at some point.
I believe I've occupied more than my share of time, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you and wish you well in your pursuits.